Hi everybody. So in the last class we discussed about the root and its function. Okay. So in the last class what we discussed is about the structure of a root, types of root like taproot, fibrous root system, and adventitious root system. So the main function of root is to anchor the plant. Okay. So anchoring is the main function of the root. So anchoring means it holds the plant into the soil very firmly. Okay, that is the function. Then we discussed about absorption. Okay, so absorption is second most important function of the root, where it helps in absorption of water as well as nutrients from the soil. The specific part of the root which helps in that absorption is root hair. Okay, so root hair, yesterday we discussed that parts of the root also. So the tip of a root is having the meristematic zone. That meristematic zone is protected by a thimble like a structure called a root cap. So above the meristematic zone is the elongation zone, where the divided cell elongates. After that proximal to that elongation zone is a maturation zone, where the cell is going to mature according to the position where it is actually. So according to that position it gets differentiated or matured into either epidermis or cortex or xylem or phloem, like that. Okay. So in that part the thin hair like structure is produced from the outermost epidermis called as a root hair. That means for absorption. Okay. Next we discussed about storage. Okay, so storage, so especially the food storage. Okay, so plants store the residue food in the form of starch. So starch is get stored in the roots by little bit modified. So during the storage they swells up and store more residue food. Okay, so in that we discussed the modification of taproot like conical, napiform and fusiform. With respect to the conical is example carrot, and a napiform beetroot or turnip, and a fusiform such as radish. Okay, and the adventitious root modification for food storage also we discussed yesterday. The example for adventitious root is sweet potato. Okay, so sweet potato get modified to store the food. It is an example for adventitious root. At the same time we discussed asparagus, where it is called as a fasciculated root. So asparagus which store the food, so many roots are swollen and they store the food, so it forms the numerous root tubes. Okay, that we discussed under the storage. And we also discussed yesterday about the mechanical supportive tissues, roots. So mechanical supportive roots are the roots which helps in supporting of a plant. Okay, so we discussed of course most of these mechanical supportive roots are adventitious roots only. Okay, so these adventitious roots like in banyan tree, such as prop roots. So prop roots helps that banyan tree helps in the spreading over the larger area as well. And then we discussed about the thin, wiry, strong roots which are produced at the internode part or lower internode of a plant in case of maize and sugarcane, such as stilt root. Okay. Then apart from that stilt root, we also discussed clinging roots. So clinging roots that helps in climbing of the beetle vine, or in orchids we saw that type of roots. So these are the things yesterday we discussed. Okay, so let's see one more type of function of a root, that is respiration. Okay, so respiration was so these roots are called respiring roots. These are called respiring roots. Okay, so why they called so? Okay, so because these respiring roots are produced in mangrove plants. Okay, so these respiring roots are not seen in all plants, they are seen only in that mangrove plants. Okay, so these mangrove plants grows mangrove plants grows in saline soil. Okay, so saline ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸಾಲ್ಟ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇರುವಂಥದ್ದು ಅಂತ. Okay, saline means more salt. Okay, so since the plants which are grows in the saline condition, they face some problems. Suppose these are the plants. Okay, there are plants irate, branches irate, they produces the leaves. Okay, so when they absorb the water through the root system, of course taproot system irate, they shows the root. Okay, so they absorb the water and water is transported to the leaf. So in the leaf these salt along with the water, they absorb more salt as well. So that salt is get accumulated on the leaf. The leaf malella accumulate agbidutte. Okay, and it closes the stomata, so it creates a problem for gaseous exchange. ಅಂದರೆ gaseous exchangeಗೆ ಸ್ಟೊಮ್ಯಾಟೊ ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ ಆಗೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಫಾರ್ ದಟ್ gaseous exchange they have one unique idea. So what they have, they grow some roots. Instead of growing into the soil, some top roots they grows horizontally like this. Horizontally grow ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Then these roots they starts grow upwards. ಈ ಥರ upward directionಗೆ grow ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. They see there, all the roots are like positively geotrophic, but these few roots they are negatively geotrophic and they grows out of the soil. So ಈ ರೀತಿ soil ಇಂದ ಹೊರಗಡೆ grow ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Okay, and these roots helps in gaseous exchange. Okay, so these are the vertical roots which are produced from the root itself under the soil, and they came out and they helps in respiration. So that's the reason why they are called as respiring roots. Okay, so this is the mangrove plant. So this is a horizontal root. This is horizontal root, and these roots are vertical roots. So these are vertical roots. So these vertical roots are called as nematophores. ಇವನ್ನೇ nematophores ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. So normal roots are also there which grows towards the soil, earth. Okay, they are positively geotrophic, but few roots which grows away from the soil. Okay, they came out of the soil. Since the whole water is our soil consisting of saline, salt ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. Okay, so grows in the saline soil. Few roots grows vertically, okay, and came out of the soil, Okay, so vertically grow ಆಗ್ತವೆ and they came out of the soil. Those roots are called nematophores. They are called as nematophores. Okay, so if you recall the name PHORE, okay, 4 means stalk anta helide. Okay, so like a sporangiophore, conidiophore, antheridophore, like that. 4 is a stalk, so it resembles a stalk like structure. Okay, on this stalk like structure, is stalk like structure ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ So let me write that a single structure. So let's see, this is the pneumatophore. Okay, so on this pneumatophore, very small pores are present. Just like stomata, gaseous exchange ಗೆ help ಮಾಡುವಂಥದ್ದು. This whole thing is pneumatophore. On the pneumatophore, we can find pneumatophores. Okay, so these pneumatophores helps in gaseous exchange. Pneumatophore has pneumatophore. Pore is small hole anteli. Pneumatophore. Okay, these pneumatophores helps in gaseous exchange. Okay, so gaseous exchange takes place through these pneumatophores. So this pneumatophores helps in gaseous exchange, transport the carbon dioxide and oxygen through these pneumatophores takes place. Okay, so that is the reason why they are called as respiring roots or pneumatophores. Okay, respiring roots are also called as pneumatophores. These pneumatophores have small pores called as pneumatophores. Through the pneumatophores, gaseous exchange takes place. Okay. So, hope you got how the roots are involved in respiration. Okay, remember these are observed only in mangrove plants. Mangrove plants are ಮಾತ್ರ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. So Sundarbans, if you heard the name Sundarbans, so the plants which are grows in that Sundarbans, they are called as the Sundari trees. Okay, so those Sundarbans plants are Sundari trees produces this pneumatophores. Okay, so example for these pneumatophores. So example for this respiring roots is plant called Rhizophora species. Okay, so remember the name Rhizophora species are example for the plants having respiring roots. Okay, so this is about one more function of a root called as respiration. Okay, so let's move on to the next type of modification. See that this is a type of special kind, that is why it is called as a modification. So normal root ginta ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ different ಇರುತ್ತೆ. Okay, that is the reason why they are called as modification. So certain attributes which are not normal, they have a special kind of attributions, so called modifications. Okay, so next function is floating. Okay, so these floating root types, they are observed in hydrophytes. Floating roots. Okay, so these floating roots observed in hydro means water, phyte means plant, PHYT, observed in hydrophyte. Okay, so since they are grows in the water, they need to float on the water, that's why they are observed in the hydrophytes. They are specialized roots. Specialized roots. They become spongy. Helps in floating. Floating help ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. Okay, so ಯಾವ ಥರ ಅಂದರೆ in some plants like Jessia ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ ಇದೆ. So in Jessia plant, so it is an angiosperm. It produces the leaves like this on the surface of water. So it produces the normal roots, but few roots which came out and they become like this. The normal root jotege they produce a very special kind of roots. Okay, so these roots are called, these are actually spongy roots. Okay, so normal root ginta ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ soil, they came out of the water and they become spongy, they're filled with the parenchyma. Okay, the special type of tissue called parenchyma that helps in floating. Okay, so helps in floating, as in case of a plant called Jessia. There's a plant called Jessia. In the Jessia you can see these floating roots, or spongy roots, are also called as floating roots. Okay, so these are some examples for this is an example for floating root. Okay, so next function, some roots perform photosynthesis. Of course, the main organ for photosynthesis is leaf, but in some plants, very few plants, root perform the photosynthesis. So usually in case of root, the chlorophyll is absent, they are non-green in color. Okay, so since the roots are grown inside the soil, they are not exposed to the sunlight, so there is no synthesis of chlorophyll in the root cells. But in some plants, the root, specialized roots, they meet for photosynthesis. They synthesize chlorophyll and they are appears green in color. Okay, so called a photosynthetic root. Photosynthetic root or assimilatory roots. They are also called as assimilatory roots. Okay, assimilatory roots anta kuda kariತೀವಿ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ. So ಏನದು assimilatory root? They perform photosynthesis. They perform photosynthesis. Okay, that's why they are called as assimilatory roots. So two examples were there for this assimilatory root. We can give the common plant like Tinospora. Okay, so ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಮೃತಬಳ್ಳಿ ಅಂತಾರೆ. Called Tinospora. In Tinospora you can see these assimilatory roots. So Tinospora is a climber which climbs over other plant. ಬಳ್ಳಿ ಥರ ಹಬ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಯೂಶಲಿ ಟ್ರೀಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಗ್ರೋ ಆಗಿರೋಂಥ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಇದು ಈಸಿಯಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು. ಸೊ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಹೀಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಹಬ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಆನ್ ದ ಬ್ರಾಂಚ್, ಸಪೋಸ್ ಬ್ರಾಂಚ್ ಮೇಲೂ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ ಗ್ರೋ ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ, ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಇಟ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸಸ್ ಹಾರ್ಟ್ ಶೇಪ್ಡ್ ಲೀವ್ಸ್. ಈ ಥರ ಹಾರ್ಟ್ ಶೇಪಲ್ಲಿರೋ ಲೀವ್ಸನ್ನು ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. Okay, so sometimes these plant sends some roots. They are hanging roots. ಈ ಥರ ತೆಳು ದಾರ ಥರ ಇರೋ ರೂಟ್ಸನ್ನು ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿರುತ್ತೆ ದಿ ಸ್ಟಿನೋಸ್ಪೋರಾ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್. ಓಕೆ, ದೇ ಆರ್ ಥಿನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಥಿನ್ ಹ್ಯಾಂಗಿಂಗ್ ರೂಟ್ಸ್. these thin hanging roots, they are photosynthetic in nature. Okay, so they are in the early stage they are thin and green in color, and later they come covered by the brown scaly structure. Okay, so these roots are photosynthetic. They are photosynthetic. Okay, and one more example is a plant called trappa. Okay, so trappa is aquatic plant. Aquatic plant, root perform photosynthesis there. Okay, so these are the two examples. Okay. So you can remember the examples for photosynthetic root. And in some orchids also they perform photosynthesis. Okay. Now let me add one more function. That is synthesis of synthesis. Okay, so let me give the heading like a synthesis itself. Synthesis. What is the root synthesis, Sandra? Root synthesize roots synthesize plant growth hormones. Okay, plant growth hormones na synthesize ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, also called as plant growth regulators. They are also called as plant growth regulators. So plant growth regulators, they are synthesized in root. Okay, so we are going to learn in detail about these plant growth regulators in the last chapter of the botany. So plant growth and development. In the chapter you are going to learn what are those plant growth regulators and how they are transported and what is the function. So let me give what are the type of hormones they are synthesized, means cytokinin and gibberellins. Okay, yeah, so two examples, cytokinin and gibberellins, which are synthesized in the root. Okay, so this is about the functions of root. Okay. Yeah. So far we discussed the root, the types of roots, and what are the functions of the root. The next part of the plant we need to discuss is the next important part, that is stem. Okay, so next part is stem. Okay, so it is nothing but shoot system. Stem is nothing but shoot system. So in the previous class itself we discussed which part of the embryo that gives rise to the shoot system. Okay, so we discussed that already. Okay, so this shoot system developed from shoot system developed from plumule, developed from plumule of embryo. Okay, so embryodalliro plumule part in the shoot system develop ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. So we are already discussed. So if you open the dicot seed, you can observe the structure like this. So this is the embryo and this is the radical part and this is the plumule part. So this plumule part later gives rise to the shoot system. Okay, so this is about the shoot system. So usually shoot is green in color in the early stage, green in color in the herbs we can say. So green in color in the early stage. Later later they become brownish, as in trees. Okay, so tender shoot we call it as. So tender shoot is always green in color. Later with the advancement in the growth, the secondary growth, especially there is a special kind of growth called a secondary growth. When the secondary growth occurs, the green color is not observed in the shoot. Instead, a brown color is formed there during the secondary growth due to the formation of bark and all. You are going to learn in anatomy class about that. Okay, shoot has athwa stem has, we can say shoot or stem has nodes and internodes. So this is one of the major difference between stem and root. So these nodes and internodes, they are absent in root but they are present in stem. Okay. Stem bears leaves. Stem bears leaves. Okay, so leaves are produced at nodes. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ಸ್ ಮತ್ತು ಇಂಟರ್ನೋಡ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ವು ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ದೆ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸಸ್ ಲೀವ್ಸ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಹೇಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ನೋಡ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಇಂಟರ್ನೋಡ್ಸ್? ಸೊ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ಲಿ ಸಿ ದಟ್ ನೋಡ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಇಂಟರ್ನೋಡ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಮೊನೊಕಾಟ್ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್. If you consider the monocot plant, clearly you can differentiate it. Suppose if you consider maize or sugarcane, it has the structures like this. Okay, so here this part which look like this is the node, and this is also node, this is also node. So like this we can observe nodes. So between the two successive nodes, ಎರಡು successive node ಮಧ್ಯ ಇರೋ ಜಾಗ ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ, this is called internode. Okay, so in case of monocot, leaves are produced here and sometimes they cover the node and they expose like this. ಈ ಥರ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗಿರೋ ಲೀಫ್ ಇಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಬಂದು ಈ ಕಡೆಗೆ ಹೋಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಲೈಕ್ ದಿಸ್ ಲೀವ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ಡ್ ಅಟ್ ದ ನೋಡ್ಸ್. ಈ ನೋಡ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗಿ ಇಟ್ ಕವರ್ಸ್ ದ ಇಂಟರ್ ನೋಡ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಕೇಮ್ ಔಟ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ದ leaf as in case of monocot, but in case of dicot it is a little different. So let's see how it is there in the dicot. So this is in case of monocot, but in case of dicot, so how the structure is. So in case of dicot, you can observe the stem, but here there is no clear cut lines like structures to differentiate nodes and internodes, but depending on the leaf position, so here wherever the leaf is present, so elli leaf produce ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೋ that part represents node. So this is node, this is node, and this is also node. Okay, so the between the successive nodes, so this is one node, this is another node. In between these, so this part is internode. Okay, so this part is internode, so this is internode, ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ತನಕ ಇರೋದು internode. Like that, between two successive node is the internode. Okay, so remember, leaves are always produced at nodes ಇಂದನೇ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ leaves. Okay, so leaves are produced at nodes. Okay, between two successive node is internode. Between two successive nodes is internode. Okay, internode never bears leaves or flowers. ಆ ಇಂಟರ್ನೋಡ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಲೀವ್ಸ್ ಆಗಲಿ ಮತ್ತು ಫ್ಲವರ್ಸ್ ಆಗಲಿ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಅಂದರೆ ಇದು ಇಂಟರ್ನೋಡ್ ಇದೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಲೀಫ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಅಥವಾ ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಫ್ಲವರ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಫ್ಲವರ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲೀವ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಆಲ್ವೇಸ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ಡ್ ಅಟ್ ದ ನೋಡಲ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್. ಓಕೆ, ಯಾ, the part where leaf attached to stem is called axil of leaf. So it is called axil. Okay, ಅದನ್ನ axil ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಅಂದರೆ ಈ ಲೀಫು ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಅಟ್ಯಾಚ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಸ್ಟೆಮಿಗೆ ಇದನ್ನು ಆಕ್ಸಿಲ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಈ ಆಕ್ಸಿಲಿಂದ ಸಮ್ ಬಡ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಗ್ರೋ ದೇರ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಆಕ್ಸಿಲರಿ ಬಡ್ಸ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಇದನ್ನು ಆಕ್ಸಿಲರಿ ಬಡ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಓಕೆ, axile bears small bud called axillary bud. ಅದನ್ನು axillary bud ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಅಟ್ ದ ಜಂಕ್ಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಲೀವ್ಸ್ ಇಸ್ ದ axile. ಆ axil ಇಂದ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಮಾಲ್ ಬಡ್ಸ್ ಬಂದಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಲೀಫಿ ಬಡ್, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ axillary bud. ದಿಸ್ axillary bud produces branches. ಈ ಆಕ್ಸಿಲರಿ ಬಡ್ಡು ಬ್ರಾಂಚಸ್ ಅನ್ನು ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಲೇಟರ್ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ದಿಸ್ ಬಡ್ ಗ್ರೋಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಬಿಯರ್ಸ್ ದ leaves and it become a branch. Okay, so axillary bud produces the branch. And sometimes these axillary buds are get modified into different parts. We can discuss it later. Okay. Okay, so then this shoot athwa stem expose the leaf for ಫೋಟೋಸಿಂಥಸಿಸ್ಗೆ ಲೀಫನ್ನು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೋಸ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಈ ರೀತಿ ಲೀಫನ್ನು ಸನ್ಲೈಟಿಗೆ ಒಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಕ್ಕೆ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಒನ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್. Then stem expose the leaf for photosynthesis. That is one thing. Then it helps in conduction of water and ಮಿನರಲ್ಸ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ನೀವು ರೂಟಿಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋ ಲೀಫಿಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋ ವಾಟರ್ನ ಕಂಡಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಚಾನಲ್ ಥರ ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಇಟ್ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಕಂಡಕ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ದ ವಾಟರ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದ ಮಿನರಲ್ಸ್ ಆಸ್ ವೆಲ್ ಆಸ್ ದ ಫುಡ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಟೇಷನ್ ದಟ್ ಟೇಕ್ಸ್ ಪ್ಲೇಸ್ ಥ್ರೂ ದ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಬ್ರೀಫ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ ರಿಗಾರ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ದ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್. ಓಕೆ, so of course along with this I already discussed the functions of the stem as well. Okay, So let me discuss the functions again. We already discussed it, so under the heading we can discuss it again. Functions of stem. So it bears leaves, expose the leaves to sunlight. Expose the leaf to sunlight. Okay. Helps in food and water conduction. Food ಮತ್ತು ವಾಟರ್ ಕಂಡಕ್ಷನ್ಗೆ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. It also helps in perennation. Okay, helps in perennation. Okay, so I will explain it a little bit later. Then helps in perennation. Then helps in vegetative propagation. Okay, so vegetative propagation ಗೆ help ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. So what is that vegetative propagation? So vegetative means the main plant part. A stem ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ, that is the whole thing is called as a vegetative part. That vegetative part can be used to propagate ಅಥವಾ grow ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ help ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು plant ನ ಅಂತ. Plant ನ grow ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಹೊಸ plant ನ produce ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ we can use the stem as a vegetative propagule. Okay, now of course it is understood directly. It bears the leaves, expose the leaves to sunlight, then helps in food and water conduction. So there is because this inside the stem you have that small pipe like structure called xylem and phloem, through that water and food conduction takes place. Helps in perennation. So let's see what is that perennation. Perennation means to overcome adverse environmental condition. Okay, so perennation organ is also called as a dormant structure. ಇದನ್ನ ಡಾರ್ಮೆನ್ಸಿ ಅಂತ ಕೂಡ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಡಾರ್ಮೆನ್ಸಿಗೆ ಹೋಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್ ಅಂತೇಳಿ. ಸೊ what type of plants they need, they undergo perennation or they need this dormant stage. Okay. So just imagine there is a stem that grows under the soil. So soil ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಳಗಡೆ ಗ್ರೋ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟೆಮ್. Okay, so which produces the leaves and the stem outside like this. Leaves ಎಲ್ಲ produce ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. Okay, so adverse condition means unavailability of water or more high temperature ಇತ್ತಂದ್ರೆ, so the leaves are going to die. ಡ್ರೈ ಆಗಿ ಸತ್ತೋಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ ದಿಸ್ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್ ಸ್ಟಿಲ್ ವಿಚ್ ಇಸ್ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟ್ ಅಂಡರ್ ದ ಸಾಯಿಲ್, ಅದು ಸಾಯಿಲ್ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಹಾಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಇನ್ ಎ ಡಾರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಅಂಟಿಲ್ ದ ಫೇವರಬಲ್ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ರಿಟರ್ನ್ಸ್. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋ ವಾಟರ್ ಮತ್ತು ಲೋ ಟೆಂಪರೇಚರ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಿಕ್ಕಾಗ ಎಗೈನ್ ಇಟ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸಸ್ ದ ಲೀವ್ಸ್. So until that favorable condition returns, it is in a dormant state. That dormancy state of that stem is nothing but perennation. Okay, so why plant have adopted this kind andre to overcome the adverse environmental condition. So if the condition is not suitable for growth, it do not shows the growth, it is present under the soil as a dormant structure. Okay, later when the favorable condition returns, it starts produces the leaves. Okay, so helps in perennation as in ginger. ಶುಂಠಿ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಶುಂಠಿ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಅ ಮಾಡಿಫೈಡ್ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್. ಆ್ಯಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಆ ಮಾಡಿಫೈಡ್ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್ ಆಗಿರೋ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಏನಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಸಾಯಿಲ್ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಹಾಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಯಾವಾಗ ಅಂಟಿಲ್ ಫೇವರಬಲ್ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ರಿಟರ್ನ್ಸ್, ಫೇವರಬಲ್ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ಬಂದಾಗ ಮತ್ತೆ ಸಾಯಿಲಿಂದ ಲೀವ್ಸ್ ಹೊರಗೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಸ್ಟೆಮ್ ವಿಚ್ ಗ್ರೋಸ್ ಅಂಡರ್ ದ ಸಾಯಿಲ್ ಇಟ್ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್. ಓಕೆ, ಆ ಸಾಯಿಲ್ ಒಳಗಡೆನೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಲೀಫ್ ಮಾತ್ರ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ ಫಾರ್ ಫೋಟೋಸಿಂಥಸಿಸ್. ಓಕೆ, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಪೆರಿನೇಷನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ವೆಜಿಟೇಟಿವ್ ಪ್ರಾಪಗೇಷನ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಇಫ್ ಯು ನೋ some plants like sugar cane, ಶುಗರ್ ಕೇನ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಲ್ಟಿವೇಟೆಡ್. ಹೊಸ ಶುಗರ್ ಕೇನ್ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಸನ್ನು ಹೆಂಗೆ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಸೊ ಸಿನ್ಸ್ it belongs to the monocot actually, sugar cane. It has nodes and internodes. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ಸ್ ಮತ್ತು ಇಂಟರ್ನೋಡ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. Of course, not all the plants can be used as a vegetative propagule material. So this sugarcane nodes contains some buds there. ಇದೊಂದು ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. So these are nothing but the buds. So how do the farmers grow the sugarcane ಅಂದರೆ, they cut and remove the internode part. ಈ internode part ಅನ್ನು ರಿಮೂವ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಈ ಥರ. They cut and remove the internode part by retaining only the nodal part. Nodal part ಮಾತ್ರ ರಿಟೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಉಳಿದಿದ್ದ internode part ಅನ್ನು ರಿಮೂವ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ನಾವು ಇದು ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದರೆ ಈ ಥರ ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಉಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿರುತ್ತೆ. ದೇ ರಿಟೈನ್ ದ ನೋಡಲ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ, ದೇ ರಿಮೂವ್ ದಟ್ ಇಂಟರ್ನೋಡ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸಪೋಸ್ ಓನ್ ದಿಸ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್, ಈ ಪಾರ್ಟನ್ನು ತಗೊಂಡೋಗಿ ಸಾಯಿಲಿಗೆ ಹಾಕ್ತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಲೆಟ್ ಮಿ ರೈಟ್. ಸೊ ಇಟ್ ಪುಟ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ದ ಸಾಯಿಲ್. ನಾವ್ ದಿಸ್ ನೋಡ್, ಈ ನೋಡಲ್ಲಿರೋ ಆ ಬಡ್ ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ, ದಿಸ್ ಬಡ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಗ್ರೋ ದೇರ್. ಸೊ ಈ ಥರ ಗ್ರೋ ಆಗಕ್ಕೆ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. So like this, one sugarcane, by using one sugarcane plant, how many nodes it has, that much of plants we can produce it as a vegetative propagule. Okay, and you can observe the same thing in case of hibiscus. Okay, so hibiscus in this China rose. Okay, ದಾಸವಾಳದ ಹೂ ಅಂತೀವಲ್ವಾ, that is ದಾಸವಾಳ. Hibiscus is hibiscus ಇರ್ಬೋದು, then rose. Do you know how these hibiscus and rose plants are propagated or cultivated? So we are not going to take the hibiscus seeds and sown into the soil and a new plant is going to produce. At the same time, in case of rose, we are not going to sow the seeds ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು rose plant ನ produce ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ. Instead, in both of these hibiscus and rose, we are using stem cuttings. Okay, so stem cuttings na use ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ. So cut the stem, put into the soil, new plant is emerged out. Okay, so that is how the vegetative propagation can be achieved by using stem in some plants. Okay, at the same time, in some plants root can also be used as a vegetative propagule material. ಕೆಲವೊಂದು specific plants ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ root ಅನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರೆ ಹೊಸ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. Okay, that's also possible. Okay, so this is about the function of stem. Okay. So under the root section we studied, a root has certain modifications. That modifications made it give it a different names. Okay, by undergoing certain modification, it perform very specific functions. In the same way, these stems also shows certain modifications. So due to that modifications, they can perform very specific functions. Okay, so now we can study the modifications of stem. Modifications of stem. Okay, so these modifications of stem can be studied under different headings, because sometimes stem is modified and it grows under the soil. Okay, so called underground modification. Underground modification. Okay. Underground modifications, and just above the soil, some stems shows different types of modifications. So such type of modifications are called subaerial modification, subaerial modifications, and aerial modifications. Okay, so three types of modifications can be seen in stem. In some plants, stem which is present under the soil shows the modification. That's why it is called as underground modification. And in some plants, just above the soil, some modifications were there. Such modifications are called as subaerial modifications. And above the soil, the main stem, in the stem, certain modifications were observed. Such modifications are called as aerial modifications. Okay, and these modifications helps in food storage ಗೆ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಪ್ರೊಟೆಕ್ಷನ್ನಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. And for perination ಗೆ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. And even helps in propagation. Okay, so these modifications that help in different means, such as underground modification that helps for food storage and perination, whereas this subaerial modification helps in protection. Okay, so helps in protection and even for food storage. Then aerial modification, subaerial modification, it helps in propagation. So propagation, most of the case that helps in propagation, whereas the aerial modification that mean for protection, food storage as well as propagation. So ಈ ರೀತಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಟೈಪ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಕೂಡ modifications ಇದೆ. Okay, so today let me simply give me the examples for this type of modifications. So in the next class we can discuss in detail. So ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ್ದು ಸ್ಟೆಮ್ಗಳು ಅಂಡರ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದಿಷ್ಟು ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೇನೆ. Okay, so tomorrow we can discuss it in detail. Okay, so underground modification, as in case of potato. Remember, potato, it grows in the soil. It is not a root, it is a stem. Okay, then ginger, ಶುಂಠಿ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಈ ಜಿಂಜರ್ ಕೂಡ ಅಂಡರ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಮಾಡಿಫಿಕೇಶನ್. ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಎ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್. ಸೊ ವೈ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಅ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್, ಅದು ಯಾಕಿರುತ್ತೆ ಸಾಯಿಲ್ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಅದನ್ನು ನಾಳೆ ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಮಾಡೋಣ. ದೆನ್ ಸಬೇರಿಯಲ್ ಮಾಡಿಫಿಕೇಶನ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಸಬೇರಿಯಲ್ ಮಾಡಿಫಿಕೇಶನ್ಗೆ ಸಡನ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ಸ್ ವರ್ ದೇರ್ ಲೈಕ್ ರನ್ನರ್, ಸ್ಟೋಲಾನ್, ಆಫ್ಸೆಟ್, and sucker. So ಈ ಥರ modifications ಇದೆ. Okay, runner, stolen, offset and sucker are example for subaerial modification. So aerial modification for food storage, aerial modification for food storage and for protection. So such as thorns, then tendrils. Okay, thorns ಇರುತ್ತೆ, tendrilsಗಳು. Okay, so food storage-ಗೆ as in case of sugar cane. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಮತ್ತು ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಳ್ಳುಗಳು ಮತ್ತು ಬಳ್ಳಿ ಹಬ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡುವಂಥ ಟೆಂಡ್ರಿಲ್ಸ್ಗಳು. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಪ್ರೊಟೆಕ್ಷನ್ನಿಗೆ ಇರೋವಂಥದ್ದು. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ದೀಸ್ ಆರ್ ಏರಿಯಲ್ ಮಾಡಿಫಿಕೇಶನ್ಸ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಇನ್ ದ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಇನ್ ಡೀಟೇಲ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದ ಅಂಡರ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಮಾಡಿಫಿಕೇಶನ್. ಸೊ ವೈ ದೇ ಆರ್ ಅಂಡರ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಇನ್ ನೇಚರ್, ವಾಟ್ ಆರ್ ದ ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದಟ್ ಅಂಡರ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಮಾಡಿಫೈಡ್ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಎವ್ರಿಥಿಂಗ್ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಓಕೆ, ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.